I am Dr. Ceena Paul, Associate Professor from Shri M.D. Shah Mahila College of Arts and Commerce, Malad. Today I will be covering chapter number 4. The title of the chapter is Private Sector, Public Sector and Small Scale Sector. Today, in this chapter, the following content will be covered. The first, objective. Second, public sector, role of public sector, problems of the public sector, performance of the public sector enterprise, private sector, role of the private sector, problem of the private sector, small-scale industrial sector, role and performance of the small-scale industrial sector, problems of small-scale industrial sector, privatization, disinvestment in India, and conclusion. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to understand role and problems of private sector, role, performance and problems of public sector, role, performance and problems of the small-scale sector, and disinvestment policy of the government. First topic which I will be covering is public sector. Prior to independence, public sector role was limited to activities like irrigation, communication, railways, ports, power, and some departmental undertakings. The scenario changed after the announcement of Industrial Policy 1948 and 1956, as large number of industries were placed under public sector monopoly. The details of Industrial Policy 1948 and 1956 is covered in Unit Number 2. According to the policy resolution, basic and heavy industries were kept for the public sector, whereas the entire field of consumer good industries were left to the private sector. Outside the industrial field, while most of the banks, financial institutions, railways, air transport were kept in the public sector domain, whereas the entire agriculture sector and retail trade were kept in the private sector. The section reviews the role, performance, and problems of public sector. Role of public sector. Before independence, public sector had a limited role to play in the economy. Its role expanded after the adoption of planning, Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956 and socialistic pattern of our society. As our national goal, the role played by public sector in Indian economy can be understood through indicators such as employment, investment, value of output, national income generated, savings, capital formation, and capital stock. First one, share of public sector in employment. Public sector enterprises has contributed significantly in improving the overall employment situation in India. Currently, it accounts for more than 62.4% of the workers employed in the organized sector of the Indian economy. The total number of workers employed in the public sector in 1971 was 11 lakhs, but by 2010 it increased to 179 lakhs, out of which 51% was in government administration and community and personal service, and the balance 49% was spread in other economic services run by the centre, state and local government. Within the economic enterprises, the bulk of the employment was provided in sectors such as transport, storage and communication, followed by manufacturing sector. Share of public sector in GDP. Today, public sector accounts for about 1/4 of national output, but its share in GDP was marginal in early 1950s. Measured at current prices, public sector accounted for 7.5% of GDP in 1951, which expanded to 23.6% in 93-94. However, it declined to 21.2% in 2009 and 10. This major expansion in the contribution of public sector was mainly due to the expansion of public sector economic enterprise. Third point, imports substitution and export promotion. In the pre-reform period, government pursued import substitution policy vigorously to conserve foreign exchange reserve in the face of stagnant exports. To implement the policy, public sector enterprises such as Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, Bharat Electronics Limited, Hindustan Antibiotics Limited, Indian Oil Corporation, Oil and Natural Gas Commission were started specifically to produce goods which were formerly imported and thus helped in saving valuable foreign exchange. Beside import substitution, public sector enterprises also played an important role in expanding exports of the country. Hindustan Steel Limited, Bharat Electronics, Hindustan Machine Tools are some of the public enterprises which are exporting increasing proportion of their output and earning foreign exchange. The foreign exchange earning of the public sector enterprise rose from rupees 35 crores in 1965-66 to rupees 43,576 crores in 2005 and 6. The next point is share of public sector in saving and investment. Public sector has played a vital role in collecting saving and investing them during the planning period. During the first and second plan, 54% of the total investment was in the public sector and the remaining was in the private sector, which moved to 60% in the third plan, but thereafter there was a steady fall. This downward trend continued in the post-liberalization period. In the eighth plan, the share of public sector in total investment fell to 34.3%. This downward trend also reflects the growing importance accorded to the private sector. The Nationalized Bank, the State Bank of India, Industrial Development Bank of India, Industrial Finance Corporation of India, the State Financial Corporation, LIC, UTI, etc. have played an important role in collecting savings and mobilization of resources. Even though the share of public sector is commendable in the total investment, however, the share of public sector in gross domestic saving is not only poor but also witness a downward trend in the planning period. The next point to be covered is development of infrastructure. The primary requirement of economic development in any developing country is that the infrastructure should develop at a fast pace. Unfortunately, India not only inherited an underdeveloped basic infrastructure from the colonial period, but also a private sector which neither showed any interest to develop it nor had financial resources to undertake the project. These circumstances forced the state to undertake investments in infrastructural projects. These investments undertaken by the public sector benefited the private sector immensely. The next point is strong industrial base. In the planning period, the share of industrial sector comprising manufacturing, construction, electricity, gas and water supply in gross domestic product at factor cost has moved up steadily. In between 1950-51, 2011 and 12, the share of industrial sector in GDP at factor cost increased from 15% to 27%. This indicates the growing importance of the industrial sector in Indian economy. Also, the industrial base of the Indian economy is now much stronger than what it was in 1950-51. And to develop this industrial base, the government placed due weightage on the setting up of industries in the fields such as iron and steel, heavy engineering, coal, heavy electrical machinery, petroleum and natural gas, chemicals, drugs, fertilizers, etc. The government was forced to serve these industries because the private sector neglected it due to its low profitability. Also, if these industries were not set, the consumer industries in the private sector was likely to suffer. Next point, contribution to the exchequer. Public sector enterprises have contributed significantly to the treasury through the payment of corporate taxes, excise duty, customs duty and other taxes. In 2010 and 11, public sector contributed rupees 1 crore 56 lakhs and 124 crore in the form of corporate taxes, excise duty, customs duty and other taxes to treasury. Removal of regional disparity is the next point. In the pre-independence period, most of the industrial progress of the country was limited in and around the port towns of Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai. Other parts of the country lagged far behind. To overcome this regional disparity, the government set up majority of the public sector enterprise were set up in the areas neglected by the private sector. For example, all the 4 major steel plants in the public sector were set up in the backward states. Thus, it can be seen from the above that from every angle, the public sector importance has grown and it has come to occupy a prominent place in the Indian economy. Now, till now we had seen the role played by the public sector. The next topic which we will be covering is the problems of the public sector. All is not well within the public sector enterprises. They suffer from a range of shortcomings. Some of the shortcomings encountered by the public sector enterprises which merit consideration are A. low level of profit. One of the criticism which is leveled against the public sector enterprises that in relation to the capital employed, the level of profits earned by the public sector enterprises are low, and this holds good for both the central and the state-run public sector enterprise. But the problem is more acute in the case of state-run public sector enterprises. Among the state-run public sector enterprises, the biggest loss maker is State Electricity Board. In between 1991-92 to 2005 and 6, the losses incurred by the state electricity boards increased from rupees 4,117 crores to rupees 30,606 crores. In the case of the central control public sector enterprises, however, there is overall improvement as against the loss of rupees 203 crore in 1980-81. The public sector enterprises have shown a net profit of rupees 81,550 crore in 2006 and 7. Further, the number of loss-making units has decreased from 105 in 1999-2000 to only 59 in 2006 and 7. The next point we will be covering is political interference. Working of the public sector enterprise is often plagued with undue political interference. Right from the decision about the location of the public sector enterprise to the day-to-day functioning of public sector enterprises, we frequently see political consideration rather than business acumen, and this approach has led to extensive wastage of capital resources. For example, in one of the decisions of the central government, it decided to break MiG aircraft project into two parts and locate the project in two separate states. The project was decided to be located in Nasik and Koraput, which are over 900 kilometers apart from each other. The decision was done to satisfy two powerful bosses from the states. Next point, capacity utilization. Underutilization of capacity has been a serious issue with public sector enterprises. During 2005-06, we find out of the 203 public sector enterprises, 67 functioned below 50% utilization of rated capacity. Commenting at the cause of poor capacity utilization, Vijay Kelkar pointed out, after the third plan, public investments, which till then were decided mostly on the basis of planned priorities, were influenced by various other pressures. The public sector enterprises became increasingly instruments for meeting immediate or ad hoc demand, such as producing mass consumption goods, stimulate growth in economically backward area, or using local available raw materials, which were in some cases like Khitri copper ore of poor quality. Furthermore, a large number of industries which became sick under the private sector management were taken over by the government with a view to maintaining production and protecting employment. Other factors that cause underutilization of capacity in public sector enterprises include inefficient operation, poor management of some enterprise, political interference in day-to-day working, labor disputes, etc. The next problem which we will be covering is pricing policy of public sector enterprises. Private sector enterprise pricing policy is guided with the aim of maximizing profits, whereas public sector enterprises pricing policy operate with the aim of fulfillment of social objectives. This statement can be validated with the pricing policy of Fertilizer Corporation of India and Hindustan Insecticides. The two public sector enterprises produce fertilizers and pesticides respectively. Both have kept their produce price low so that even an average Indian farmer can easily purchase their produce, which helps in increasing Indian agriculture production and productivity. This policy of public sector enterprise has affected the commercial profitability of public sector enterprises. However, lately it is gradually realized among the public sector enterprise that profit should be recognized as an index of efficiency, and that profit motive is not inconsistent, broad objective with the socialistic pattern of society. The next point to be covered is delay in project completion and escalation in construction cost. Completion of projects is a serious issue in public sector enterprises. Several of them take longer time to complete them than was initially envisaged. For instance, in case of Trombay fertilizer project, it took 6 to 7 years to complete against the original estimate of 3 years. The majority of the delay in construction time schedule can be traced to poor and inadequate project planning. This delay leads to cost escalation often to the order of 10 to 15% to 80 to 90% of the original estimate. The next point to be covered is overcapitalization. One of the criticisms leveled against the public sector enterprises is that many public sector enterprises suffer from unfavorable input-output ratio. In other words, they are overcapitalized. In 1967, a study team was appointed to study the working of the public sector enterprise. In its report, it pointed out that several undertakings like Heavy Engineering Corporation, Hindustan Aeronautics, Fertilizer Corporation, etc. are overcapitalized. Also, the report mentioned the causes of overcapitalization in public sector enterprises, which included factors such as inadequate planning, delay, avoidable expenditure during construction, surplus machine capacity, bad location of projects, etc. Next point to be covered is overstaffing and other labor problem. Overstaffing of unskilled labor is another problem faced by public sector enterprises, and similarly we see salary of unskilled labor in a public sector enterprise is far higher than the private sector enterprise. All this largely due to political pressure faced by the public sector enterprise, but the salary of the skilled personnel in public sector enterprises is far lower than the private sector enterprise, and this trend has led to flight of personnel from the public sector to the private sector. Next point, lack of autonomy. Promptness in operational decision is a must for competence in business and industrial enterprise. This requires a large measure of autonomy and flexibility of operation in the government enterprise. However, managements of many public sector enterprises feel rather than autonomy, there is a range of control on their operations which inhibit the possibilities of independent action. Even in regular matters, interference persists. This leads to a sense of uncertainty and indecisiveness in top management circles. A lot of time that could have been productively utilized is wasted on drawing up explanation to convince person who matter. On the whole, we can point out it is not picture perfect within the public sector enterprise. There are a lot of lacunae in the function of public sector enterprises. The competitiveness of the private and public sector project should act as a motivating mechanism for improving efficiency in both the sectors. Next point which we are going to cover today is performance of public sector enterprise. Public sector enterprise are criticized for their poor performance as their rate of profit is either low or negative. However, some economists argues the profit should not be the only base for judging the performance of public sector enterprise. According to them, pricing policy of public sector enterprises operate with the aim of fulfillment of social objectives. Hence, it would not be appropriate to use profit as a criterion of their efficiency. This is particularly so in social utility service and public sector enterprises in heavy and basic industries. Thus, the performance of public sector enterprise should be evaluated along with the profitability criterion with its contribution towards GDP, foreign exchange earnings, creation of employment, and improvement in labor welfare. The first point to be covered as expansion of public sector enterprises and share in GDP. Public sector enterprises have witnessed massive growth after independence, which can be judged from the increase in number of operating enterprises, capital employed, and turnover. In 1951, only 5 public sector enterprises were operating with a total investment of 29 crore. In 2011, the number of operating enterprise increased to 220, while the total investment moved to 9 crore 50 lakh 449 crore. In the same period, the turnover of public sector enterprise expanded from 3 crore 89 lakh and 199 crore to 14 crore 73 lakhs and 319 crore. The next point is financial performance of public sector enterprise. As seen above, profitability is not the yardstick to assess the performance of public sector enterprise. Yes, it cannot be disregarded as they are set up at a huge cost to the national exchequer. Table 4.1 describes the financial performance of Center Public Sector Enterprise in between 1981 to 2011. From the table, it is evident that new economic reforms initiated by the government have been able to create a positive impact on the financial performance of public sector enterprise. In between 1980-81 to 1990-91, the ratio of net profit to total capital employed by public sector enterprise moved in the range of negative 1.1% to 4.5%, whereas after 1991 there is a substantial improvement in the rate of return as the ratio of net profit to capital employed increased from 2% in 1991 to 9.2% in 2010-11. Even though there is a phenomenal increase in the net profit earned by public sector enterprise, but the bulk of the net profit is contributed by petroleum industry, financial services, power and telecommunication services. Also, the government is achieving a high profitability ratio by increasing the administered price of goods produced in the public sector enterprise rather than reducing cost, improving efficiency and capacity utilization. Next point is employment and labor welfare. When we evaluate the performance of public sector enterprise on the lines of this criterion, we find that they have performed exceptionally well. The statement can be validated through the following indicators. There is steady improvement in the emoluments of public sector enterprise employees. Also, there is a stable progress in the provision of housing, medical care and educational facility provided to the employees. During 1986-87, 2010-11, the real wage emoluments per employee in the public sector enterprise advanced from rupees 28,820 to rupees 77,745 rupees. As on March 2005, public sector enterprises spent 6,163 crores on township for workers' housing, which helped in providing houses to 51% of the workers. A large chunk of employment in the organized sector is provided by the public sector enterprise. Currently, it accounts for more than 62.4% of the workers employed in the organized sector of the Indian economy. Also, an upward trend is seen in the number of workers employed by public sector enterprises. From 11 lakhs in 1971, it has increased to 179 lakhs in 2010. Next point. Public sector enterprises and foreign exchange earning. Public sector enterprises have played a vital role both in saving foreign exchange and in earning foreign exchange. India inherited an agrarian economy from the Britishers, as a result of which, after the adoption of economic planning, India had to import large amount of capital equipment, industrial goods, etc. This put a severe strain on India's limited foreign exchange reserve. To gain control over this problem, many public sector enterprises were set up, such as Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, Bharat Electronic Limited, Hindustan Antibiotics Limited, Indian Oil Corporation, Oil and Natural Gas Commission, to produce goods which were previously imported and thus help in saving foreign exchange. Besides, import substitution of public sector enterprise also played an important role in expanding exports of the country. Hindustan Steel Limited, Bharat Electronics Limited, Hindustan Machine Tools are some of the public enterprises which are exporting increasing proportion of their output and earning foreign exchange. The foreign exchange earning of the public sector enterprise rose from rupees 35 crores in 1965-66 to rupees 43,556 crore in 2005 and 6. Thank you. The next topic today we are going to cover is private sector. After independence, the concept of mixed economy was accepted by the Government of India with the announcement of Industrial Policy of 1948. The concept is further reiterated by the Industrial Policy 1956. The policies earmarked certain industries for the private sector to operate. The details we can see in unit number 2. However, the private sector had to operate with the provisions of Industries Development Regulation Act 1951 and other relevant regulations. With the passage of time, more and more concessions were granted to the private sector to expand its business activities. The Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951 had invited widespread criticism over its role as an industrial licensing authority. To overcome this criticism, the government announced the new industrial policy of 1991, which abolished the requirement of industrial license for the private sector except for few industries, opened the door wide open for foreign direct investors, role of public sector was diluted, and various incentives were given to the private sector for expanding their business. The policy brought significant changes, with many businessmen being knocked out from their top positions and number of new entrants making their mark. The section looks at the working of the private sector. The role of the private sector. The dominant sector is the first point we will be covering under the role of the private sector. The private sector contribution to the Indian economy is significant, but it doesn't not undermine the significance of private sector. This statement can be illustrated with the following statistics. As on March 31st, 2009, out of the total number of companies, 89.6% of the companies were in the private sector, whereas only 10.4% were in the public sector. In the manufacturing sector, as on March 31st, 2009, out of the total number of companies, 83.7% of the companies were in the private sector. Thus, only 16.3% manufacturing companies were in the public sector. In the terms of employment, also, share of private sector is much higher, as out of the 62.5 lakh person engaged in the manufacturing sector as on March 31st, 2010, as many as 51.84 lakh persons were working in the private sector. The next point to be covered is importance of development. In the advanced countries, private entrepreneurs have played a vital role in their economic development. Learning from the success of advanced countries, the economic planners of India also gave significant opportunities for the private sector to flourish. In 1948 and 1956 Industrial Policy Resolution, government gave immense opportunities to the private sector to expand its activity. The Rao Manmohan economic growth model, which was initiated in India after 1991, further enhanced the role of private entrepreneurs in the Indian economy and gave the commanding heights of the Indian economy to the private sector rather than public sector. Extensive modern industrial sector is the next point. India today is self-reliant in its requirement of consumer goods, and this basically is due to the efforts of private sector. The seed of consumer good industry in the private sector was laid before independence, which flourished after independence. In the pre-independence period, the main consumer industries which flourished were agro-based industry, which included cotton textile industry, sugar industry, paper industry, and edible oil industry. These industries were set up in response to the opportunities offered by the market forces. They were highly suitable for private sector since they ensured early returns and required less capital for establishment. After independence, due to the various measures announced by the government, modern industries started flourishing in the private sector, which included chemical industries like paints, varnish, plastic, etc., and industries manufacturing machine tools, machinery and plant, ferrous and non-ferrous metal, rubber, paper, etc. Potentialities due to the personal incentive in the small scale sector is the next point. In India, all the small and cottage industries are in the private sector. Personal initiative plays a decisive role in small-scale industries. With the help of small capital, small entrepreneur uses his resources efficiently to earn maximum profit. Such management is not available to public sector enterprises. The government has reserved a large number of items for production in the small-scale sector. This sector is granted loans at a concessional rates of interest, and marketing outlets are established at various places where all facilities are provided under one roof to the small-scale industry. The next point to be covered is problems of private sector. Private sector units suffered from various problems. These problems are listed below. The first problem to be covered is labor dispute. Industrial disputes are more common in private sector enterprises in comparison with public sector. The common cause for such disputes are wages, bonus, etc. These disputes, when not redressed, lead to strikes, lockouts, etc. In the process, valuable man-hours is lost and productivity suffer. Even though there is a grievance redressal system existing in the form of Works Committee, Arbitration Board for settlement of industrial dispute, yet the employees have better bargaining strength. The next point to be covered is industrial sickness. Industrial sickness is widely prevalent among the private sector enterprises. As a result, large amount of commercial bank funds are locked up in these sick units, hampering the growth of economy. As on March 2008, a total of 35,366 crore fund of scheduled commercial banks are blocked in these sick units. Increase in current account deficit is the next point. In the post-liberalization period, to compete with the giant multinational companies, private sector units resorted to huge imports of foreign technology. This has led to increase in import expenditure, which is far greater than export earning. This has pushed up the country's current account deficit. Next point, credit and finance. Financial markets in India is in an underdeveloped state, which is posing serious difficulties to private sector units for arranging funds. Further, due to inflationary tendency in the economy, the people are more attracted to invest in unproductive assets such as gold rather than in industries. Inflationary tendency have also resulted in large black marketing, which is also weaning away funds from productive activities. Next point is infrastructural problem. Infrastructure is a serious constraint to private sector units, and among the infrastructural facility, power is the most significant bottleneck, followed by transport. Industrial surveys have often found power-related issues such as acute power shortfalls, unscheduled power cuts, erratic power quality as a serious bottleneck. To overcome this bottleneck, many units have established captive power units. This has led to increase in power cost and has affected its price competitiveness. As far as transport is concerned, it has severe capacity and quality constraint. Thank you. The next topic we will be covering is small-scale industrial sector. Along with public sector and private sector, small-scale industrial sector has played a crucial role in the development of Indian economy. This sector covers a wide range of industries, categorized under small-scale industrial undertaking, ancillary industrial undertaking, export-oriented units, tiny enterprises, small-scale service enterprises, small-scale service business enterprises, artisans, village, cottage industry, and women entrepreneurs enterprise. First effort by government to define small-scale sector was done in 1950 when the government set up the limit of capital investment in small-scale industrial sector as 5 lakhs. Further, the small-scale undertakings was grouped into 2 categories: those using power but employing less than 50% and those not using power but employing less than 100 workers. At regular intervals, government has redefined the capital investment under the small-scale sector. The latest definition was announced in October 2006 when the government enacted Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise Development Act 2006. As per as this act, small-scale industrial sector was classified into 2 categories: manufacturing enterprises and service enterprises. Each category was further subdivided into 3 categories, and for each subcategory, separate investment limit was fixed. The new definition is as follows. Under manufacturing enterprises, a micro-enterprise where investment in plant and machinery does not exceed 25 lakhs. A small enterprise where the investment in plant and machinery is more than 25 lakhs but does not exceed 5 crore. A medium enterprise where the investment in plant and machinery is more than 5 crores but does not exceed 10 crore. Next is service enterprise, a micro-enterprise where the investment in equipment does not exceed 10 lakhs. A small enterprise where the investment in equipment is more than 10 lakhs but does not exceed 2 crores. A medium enterprise where the investment in plant and machinery is more than 2 crores but does not exceed 5 crores. The next topic we are seeing is role and performance of small-scale industrial sector. The small-scale sector has played a vital role in the Indian economy in respect of employment, share in industrial production, contribution of export, etc. In the following paragraphs, the role and performance of small-scale industrial sector under the above-mentioned criterion are discussed. First criterion, output and employment of small industries. As seen above, in 2006, the definition of small-scale underwent a large transformation. Currently under small-scale sector units, only manufacturing units included, and today medium enterprise and small-scale service units are included. On account of this broadened definition, small-scale industries is now known as medium, small and micro-enterprise. Output and employment of small industry. As seen above, in 2006, the definition of small-scale underwent a large transformation. Currently, under small-scale, service sector units and medium enterprises are included. Earlier, only manufacturing units were included. On account of this broad definition, small-scale enterprise is now known as medium, small and micro enterprise. As per as this new definition, in 2006 and 7, the total unit under medium, small and micro enterprise was 261.01 lakh units. Table 2.4 indicates the production, employment and exports in MSME sector, which moved up to 311.52 lakhs in 2010-11. This rapid growth in medium, small and micro enterprise had a visible impact on both in terms of output and employment. MSC production, which stood at 7 lakh, 09 and 398 lakh in 2006 and 7, rose to 10 lakh 95,758 lakhs in 10-11. This indicates that during this, the output grew by 54%. In the same period, employment under MSME increased from 594.61 lakh to 732.17 lakh, signifying a growth of 23%. The next point is exports of small industry. Table 4.2 clearly indicates that along with the production and employment, exports of MSME has also increased considerably. During the period of 2006 and 7 to 2008 and 9, the exports of MSME increased from 1,82,536 to 2,02,017, indicating an increase of 11% under MSME sector as a whole contributes about 40% of the export earning currently. A significant aspect of MSME export is a substantial share of non-traditional exports. It is estimated approximately 93% of export from MSME belong to non-traditional exports. The non-traditional export includes ready-made garments, sports goods, finished leather, leather products, woolen garments, knitwear, processed food, a large number of engineering goods. The next topic which we are going to cover is problems of small-scale industrial sector. Industrial sickness is rampant in the SSI units due to the various problems faced by them. In the following paragraph, the problems faced by SSI units are discussed. Credit and finance. Finance has been a serious constraint to small-scale industrial undertaking in comparison to large-scale sector. Large-scale sector, due to the financial strength, do get unsecured loans from public, including financial institutions. However, in the case of small-scale industrial undertaking, financial institutions are not forthcoming to meet their credit requirement due to their profit instability. In its report, the second All-Indian Census of Small-Scale Industrial Units has mentioned that the main cause of industrial sickness among the small-scale units are its financial problem. However, lately, there has been improvement in the credit flow to SSI sector from the public sector banks. In the period between March 1998 and March 2002, the credit flow to SSI sector from public sector banks increased from 38,110 crore in March 1998 to 49,743 crores in March 2002. The next point, marketing assistance. Under the domain of marketing, the problems faced by SSI units can be summarized as follows. A. SSI units do not have an elaborate marketing organization. B. SSI products are often unstandardized and often of variable quality. C. SSI units do not have a staying capacity. On account of these issues, SSI products compare unfavorably with large-scale units. Technical assistance. Next point. Technical know-how is essential not only to produce quality goods at a minimum cost but also to achieve higher productivity. But SSI suffers from both low level of technology and shortage of trained and experienced supervisory personnel. This hampers the growth of SSI. Raw material availability. SSI units using indigenous material face a series of problems. For instance, the handloom weavers are able to source cotton from the traders on the condition that not only purchase cotton from them but also sell the cloth to them. In the process, the weavers are subjected to double exploitation. That is, the weaver has to pay higher price to source the cotton. Also, they get low price for their product. Infrastructure facility. Another impediment faced by SSI units are poor infrastructure facility. In a survey conducted by Keshav Das and Sebastian Morris on SSI unit, it was found 67% of the SSI units suffer from infrastructure problem firms in India. The major infrastructure problem faced by SSI units are poor availability of power, transport, communication and water supply. Among them, the major problem faced is poor availability of power. SSI units, as they cannot afford to have a captive power generation plant, depend upon State Electricity Board for satisfying their power requirement, but SEB is unable to provide regular and adequate supply of power. The next point, trade reforms. SSI units largely depend on imported raw material and intermediate products such as steel, copper, non-ferrous metal, plastic, chemical, etc. in the process of production. After the initiation of reform in 1991, the new trend which emerged is that tariff for raw material is higher in comparison than the manufactured good. This has created the problem of significant inversion in tariff structure, which especially hurts small firms since they are more labor using and have high material to output ratio. Another aspect of this trade reform, it has allowed cheaper and better quality imported goods which are posing serious problems to small-scale units operating in industries such as toys, sports, etc. The next problem, delayed payment. SSI units also suffer due to the mismatch they have faced in giving payments and receiving payments. On the purchase side, SSI units acquire their raw material and equipment in small lots from either monopolistic or oligopolistic firms. Hence, they do not have bargaining power, on account of which they either get short credit period or they have to make advance payment to have assurance of supply. As against it, when the SSI units sell their product either to large firms or wholesalers, they are often expected to give extended credit period. Sebastian Morris, in his study on small units, indicated that the small firms provide 40 days credit to buyers of their goods and services. The payment problem persists among the SSI units even when they deal with the government departments under the government purchase program. But now the delay in payment happened due to cumbersome and complex procedure and rampant corruption in these departments. The next problem is other problems. In addition to these problems mentioned, other problems faced by SSI units can be summarized as poor management, tax burden, delicensing and de-reservation, unresponsiveness to new demand trend, challenge from large-scale industries. Thank you. The next topic today, what we are going to cover is privatization. Starting from the late 19th century, nations all over the world zealously used nationalization of private sector companies to achieve socio-economic goals of welfare state, which reached its zenith in the late 20th century. In the 1980s, however, Margaret Thatcher introduced an innovative philosophy of privatization under the name of Golden Straitjacket. This new philosophy was well received all over the world, including India. It endeavors to shift the economic decision-making from the government to the market. The concept of privatization was first mooted in India in 1991 and gained wide acceptance due to the pathetic performance of the public sector units. In its heyday, public sector undertakings accounted for 1/4 of India's GDP and 1/3 of its exports and engaged more than 70% of the workers employed in the organized sector. However, later most of the public sector units became white elephant and started incurring colossal losses. In this section, we would review the emerging issues in this investment. Privatization. Privatization is a way of altering the relationship between state and the private sector in enhancing the role of private sector. In the words of Barbara Lee and John Niels, privatization is a general process of involving the private sector in the ownership or operation of a state-owned enterprise. There are at least 3 discernible conditions of privatization. They are A. Denationalization, which involve changing the ownership of public sector assets to private sector. They may be either being partial or full, so that some of the activities of the former enterprise may be hived off or even whole of the company equity may be sold. Deregulation or liberalization, which involves opening up of areas or sectors which were hitherto reserved exclusively for the public sector. Last one, contracting out, which involves franchising to private firms the production of goods and services which are under financial control of the government. Much of the discussion on privatization has narrowly come down to equating it with the first variant of it by the sale of assets or of offloading a portion of the equity of the public sector concerned to private sector. This conversion of privatization is popularly known as disinvestment. Disinvestment in India is the next stop. Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956, which gave the sector a strategic role in the economy, largely guided the public sector policy of the 60s and the 70s. For almost 4 decades, the country pursued a path of development in which public sector was assigned the role of engine of growth. And in these 4 decades, massive investments were made to build in the public sector. However, after the initial exuberance, a number of problems began to manifest in many public sector enterprises. Problems were observed in terms of low productivity, poor project management skill, overmanning and lack of technological upgradation, inadequate attention to R&D, colossal losses, low priority to HRD in the early 90s, widening fiscal deficit, growing public sector losses, and government resolve to adopt macroeconomic reforms guided the government to announce disinvestment policy in selected public sector units. Problems in the government disinvestment policy. The disinvestment policy of the government have come under severe strain, and this criticism has been mainly on the following ground: A. Target and achievement. B. Method of disinvestment. C. Valuation of assets. D. Utilization of disinvestment proceeds. The section highlights this criticism. Target and achievement is our next criticism. The first criticism which is leveled against the disinvestment policy of the various government is the government have been unable to realize the target set by itself for disinvestment. The fact is well recorded in table 4.2. Barring few years of achievement, that is in 91, 92, 94, 95 and 2003 and 4, in other years there has been appealing gap between targets set by the government and the achievement of the disinvestment. The poor realization reflects the failure of government policy, and this failure is attributed to the following factors. Government policy of disinvestment is shrouded in mystery, red tapeism and unattractive offers made by the government for disinvestment discourages the private sector. Government offloaded the PSU when the settlements in the capital market were unfavorable, political interference and corruption. Next point, valuation of equity. The public sector unit's valuation policy followed by successive government is under cloud. It is argued PSU valuation lacks scientific method and transparency. This is evident from the haphazard sale of equity in Balco, VSNL, ITDC, etc. In case of Balco, it was sold to sterile industries for only Rs 551 crore, when at the same time the value of Balco put by different people differed as widely as 1,100 crore to 5,000 crore. 25% of VSNL shares were sold to Tata Group by government for mere 1,439 crore, and the management was handed over to Tata Group. Tata Group later on purchased 25% shares of the company from the open market at a higher price of 1,151 crore. Tata Group, after acquiring the majority holding in VSNL, acquired 26% of shares of Tata Teleservice for Rs 1,002 crore. Tata has 100% shareholding in Tata Teleservice. The fund for acquiring the share was sourced from VSNL reserve and surplus. This reserve was created out of the profit of VSNL. It was an undistributed profit of VSNL before disinvestment, and the rightful owner of that money was government. Public. An ITCT hotel in New Delhi was sold for Rs 70 crore. After 1 month, the private owner of the same sold a very small portion of the hotel for commercial purpose for Rs 70 crore. The undercurrent of all this is that the government made a substantial loss, and indirectly you and me, the Controller and AG, Controller and Auditor General of India, in its audit review, has also pointed out the considerable loss which the government has suffered on account of underpricing of PSU. Mechanism of disinvestment. How to disinvest has always been an issue for the government. In the last 20 years, government has tried out several methods of disinvestment, and each had a share of drawbacks. In the beginning, government offered only 3 to 5% of the equity in different non-strategic public sector enterprises every year. Another method of disinvestment followed by the government was offloading 50% of equity in open market to the public. Due to unfavorable capital market, the government did not receive the much needed response, and the method was abandoned by the government. Then there was a discussion to create cross-holding within the sector by selling the equity of non-strategic PEs to other PEs like ONGC, IOC, etc., who had large amount of reserve. This method did not gain ground as it was opposed by the rich public sector enterprise, also the bankers. During 1998-99, the Finance Ministry came out with a novel method of disinvesting public sector stock by selling it to the special purpose vehicle. According to the proposal, financial institution banks would float special purpose vehicle in the form of mutual fund and subscribe the equity of profit-making public sector enterprise in excess of 49% and retail the shares to the public at the opportune time and when the market picks up. This proposal could not be implemented due to political compulsion like loss of control, tax problem, etc. During the 1999-2000, a proposal of disinvestment was mooted during the issue of golden share concept. According to this concept, government will disinvest all the 100% shares to the private individual and retain only one share with itself known as golden share. The golden share will have the power to have a nominee in the board and the power to veto all types of management decision, which according to government will go against the interest of the public. However, this proposal could not be implemented because it needed to implement the Indian Companies Act, which permit only the issue of equity share and preference share and not golden share. After much deliberation, the Department of Disinvestment proposed strategic sale of almost all public sector enterprise in the non-strategic area to highest bidder who will be allowed to purchase up to 74% of the government equity in the company. In 2002 and 3, the disinvestment mechanism was broadened to include offer for sales to residual shares in privatized public sector enterprise and the minority portion of government equity in select public sector enterprise. The UPA government opposed a strategic sale of profit-making PSU and decided to call off the sale. However, it favored the sale of minority stake in listed profitable PSUs on domestic stock exchange, but at the same time retaining at least 50% of the shares and full management control with the government so as not to disturb the public sector character. Thus, from the above discussion, indeed it is clear the government has not zeroed the right method of disinvestment, which is free from any drawback. This indicates the sorry state of affair of our disinvestment policy. Next criticism is on application of disinvestment procedure. As seen above, the public sector equity has been sold for a fraction of what it could actually fetch. However, the story doesn't end here. There is also apprehension that a fund is utilized to cover the fiscal deficit. Ideally, funds should have been used for the repayment of government debt, which was initially taken to finance this PSUs, or this money should be used for restructuring loss-making PSU. At various points, government also gave assurance that the fund proceeds would be utilized productively. Like the announcement of disinvestment fund and the promise that the disinvestment proceeds would be diverted to the fund has still not seen the light of the day. Similarly, the promise made by the minister that the investment proceed will be used for meeting expenditure in social sector, restructuring using PSU and retiring public debt. All these talks have remained unfulfilled promises. The fact remains that the money raised through disinvestment becomes a part of Consolidated Fund of India. Once it becomes a part of the Consolidated Fund, it becomes difficult to track the usage of money. Neither the government has issued a clear-cut statement how the fund money has been used. All this clearly indicates the government uses the fund for covering up the fiscal deficit. Conclusion. From the above review, it is indeed clear the disinvestment policy is an open-ended policy and political priorities rule the roast. Government often cites reform initiated by Mrs. Margaret Thatcher as a role model for the PSUs privatized in our country. However, what a politician miss is the reforms introduced by Mrs. Thatcher were well debated in the House of Commons and a clear strategy was formulated before it was implemented. Government, in its reckless speed of selling PSU, has also neglected the negative impact of policy would have on the employees. Again, the government can learn lesson from Mrs. Thatcher, who warded off this negative impact by offering the equities of PSU to employees of the PSU concern. Self-assessment question. Describe the role played by public sector enterprises. Explain the problems encountered by public sector enterprises. Evaluate the performance of public sector enterprises. Small-scale sector has contributed significantly for the development of Indian economy. Discuss. Industrial sickness is rampant among the SSI units. Discuss the role played by private sector units along with the problem. Critically evaluate the disinvestment policy of the Government of India. Thank you.